In this episode, we're going to break down what CFIT and LOC-I actually mean, why they're still such a stubborn problem, what the leading causes look like across airlines, helicopters, and general aviation, and how we train to mitigate them, including the tricky bit, risk versus reward in training, and where simulators generally move the needle. I'm going to discuss all this and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 7640, 95 Mallow, 7 PAB with altitude.
Coordinating, Halen, I'm running bank balance, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there.
Semi star 9000, 1013, CFIT 25.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 192 of Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host, Trent Robinson, and thank you for joining me. I hope you've all had a very Merry Christmas. You've had a fantastic break, catching up with family, friends, whether you flew home or lucky enough to live where everybody else is. I hope you had a fantastic day. For all those flight crew, cabin crew, ground crew, engineering, etc. that went to work to keep the show on the road, thank you. From the photos that I saw of a lot of you, you made the most of it, got all your Santa hats and gear on, and had a great day with work colleagues, emergency crews, first responders, everyone who worked. Really grateful for that. I know I've had a crack at it during my short time at CareFlight, and other operators as well. My daughter's working in the paramedic field soon, and she's had a go, my wife in ED, and everyone who gives up those times to help others. It's really a special thing and in the service of the community. So thank you, everybody. We've been doing a lot of things lately. We did the last DC-3 flight the other day, the 90th anniversary. So 90 years of DC-3 flying, and have the pleasure of taking that beautiful bird up for a flight. And just love it. You're never going to get sick of doing that, and cannot wait to be doing more. There are still some hold-ups of things going on, regulatory approvals, etc., but the show is still going on, and there'll be more updates and all that soon. But she's going to be on the ground for a little while now. We'll start doing some maintenance work and things on it, and I'll give you more updates later on when I know more. But yeah, New Year's Eve coming up very shortly. So I'm sure you've all got your New Year's Eve resolutions planned. And I thought, look, I'm going to have a crack at it this year, because I know I have tried to promise a lot of things and not delivered. And that is just, again, my willingness to try and do too much and help too many people and put all my own things aside. So this is the year I am going to definitely try and slow things down a little bit and spend time on the things that I want to do, which is a lot of the training products and videos, YouTube, and all that sort of stuff that I really want to get going. And I keep talking about and just not having the time to do it. I'm getting some filming done, but then it just sits on the hard drive, or the cutting room floor, as they say. So very much looking forward to doing that this year, and setting some new goals to achieve that and get that content out there. Whether that means the podcast slows down a little bit, it's absolutely not going to stop, so you don't have to worry about that. But I might look at a fortnightly sort of schedule, but I'll just see how it goes. If I get time to do it, I'm going to do it. But I'm just going to back off from the aim of every week. Funnily enough, you get one episode out and the next minute it's time to put another one. And the week rolls by so fast sometimes, and we'll just keep it happening. Anyway, don't stress. I will be here. I'm not going anywhere. Love doing this, and but I just want to make some time for everything else as well. Got too many plans, too many ideas. That's my problem. All right. Thank you, everyone who contacted me, emailed, and messaged. There's actually quite a few of you, which was great. Just about the last episode with Jeremy and Shane talking to the guys at UPT Australia, we were sort of got into stalling a little bit, and there was so much more we could have talked about. Controlled flight and terrain, loss of control in flight, and UPRT implementation. And I'm doing my flight examiner recurrency stuff soon, and got into the PDP. which is a professional development program, for those who know what that means. And CASA's topic has been on UPRT training and implementation. And as we said, there were going to be some CASA syllabus changes, which unfortunately sort of stalled a little bit. And it's still there, and it's definitely something that wants to happen, but no real timeline at the moment. But I just wanted to expand a little bit more on what what this is all about and how this is going to implement. And there are things such as UPO2 courses that you can do at the right training providers, and other things that we can do whilst we wait for these other things to happen. But in order for that to happen, you need to be aware and know about it. So, quick question: what's worse, flying a perfectly good aircraft into the ground, or losing control and then hitting the ground? Right? Because in the data and accident reports and etc., those two pathways keep showing up again and again, and that is CFIT and LOC-I. All right. So again, what those terms are: controlled flight into terrain and loss of control in flight. All right. What makes these terms so confronting is that they're rarely mystery accidents. Usually, they're a chain of decisions, environmental, workload factors, training gaps, sometimes technology, and then the line you can't uncross. So CFIT is, just to go by sort of a definition, it is when an aircraft impacts terrain or water or an obstacle while the aircraft is under control. So typically with the pilot unaware of the impending impact until it's too late. The classic theme as an overall finding in most of these incidents is a loss of control or loss of situational awareness, right? Especially vertical and horizontal awareness relative to terrain and obstacles. Right. One of the things I love doing an instrument approach is taking students when they're doing IFR training to a location that doesn't approach with terrain either side in cloud. And at the right point, we'll just freeze the approach momentarily and remove the cloud and the visibility to 100%. And they're just like, wow, had no idea of what was around them. And if they deviated too far off the CDI there, that'd be in a bit of trouble. All right. But most importantly, CFIT is not loss of control. It's controlled right up to impact. And that's what makes this so brutal. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of air crash investigations episodes where this has happened before. Versus loss of control in flight, or LOC-I, is when the aircraft departs the intended flight path because control is lost, either through a stall, an upset, unusual attitude, spiral, mishandled automation, disorientation, overbanking, the list goes on. The NTSB and ATSB have long highlighted LOC-I as in GA as a major safety focus, and points out the deadliest phases, including maneuvering, climb, and approach and landing. Right, now here's the overlap. A heap of loss of control accidents end as terrain collisions, and plenty of CFIT accidents can have loss of control in flight near misses earlier in the chain, such as disorientation or rush corrections. Different labels, but the same sort of final endings. So why do these factors remain big issues still? Effectively, look, they're the human system environment problems. So these aren't usually one bad thing. They're the perfect storm of workload, task saturation, time pressures, get the job done, get their itis. Weather, visibility, nighttime factors, navigation and terrain awareness, automation and mode confusion. Okay, more so in airline environments, but I've seen plenty of people mishandle autopilots and GPS inputs in light aircraft, which, let's face it, some of them are getting incredibly capable, and that has led to incidents. And I've talked about this before, that an autopilot, the name is not the best name, because it's anything but, right? It's a bullshit in, bullshit out computer system, right? We need to make sure that we're aware of what's going on, have that FMA or flight mode awareness. All right, can be decision-making under stress, right? And that can also be as a result of training exposure or lack of realistic training, realistic scenario-based training, recurrent practice, or just lack of exposure during line operations. Everything's been nice and simple up until that point. All right. Adding to that, in Australia, we think about our realities of vast distances, remote strips, limited services available, plenty of single pilot, IFR charter operations, older aircraft at times, mountainous terrain on the eastern and southern ranges. But one of the biggest ones is most fatalities aren't happening in scheduled airline ops. It's in GA, in helicopters. Right, ATSB occurrence statistics have noted that there were no fatalities in scheduled commercial air transport in Australia from 2010 to 2019, while the majority of accidents and fatal accidents involved aircraft operating in GA and recreational aviation. So if we want to move that needle nationally, the conversation has to be in GA, in training, charter, mustering, private ops, because that's where the accidents are happening, but not where the UPRT training and the syllabus changes are being focused on and dealt with. So loss of control in flight causes, the three main buckets, if you like, are environmental, systems, and pilot-induced. So environmental being weather, visibility, night, turbulence, icing, and the like, degrading visual cues. All right. Environmental loss of control in flight is often about those degraded visual cues or unexpected energy state changes. VFR into IMC, spatial disorientation. Right. Nighttime over water flights, featureless terrain, illusions and misperceptions. Turbulence, wind shear close to the ground, icing. Okay, not everywhere. The ATSB has been very blunt about VFR into IMC risk. There are accident after accident or near miss, if you want to call it that. Their occurrence data shows about 1 in 10 VFR into IMC events results in fatality. I know of plenty of people who have recalled events, maybe not even reported, who have had the same thing happen and got away with it. So who knows what the statistics really are? This is what's reported, but I'm sure there are plenty that go unreported as well. So every VFR pilot should consider this. This isn't something that just happens to other people. Anyone can end up in IMC very, very quickly. I've discussed it up here in the dry season with the bushfire smoke. It's not so bad. It's okay. You can sort of see through it. It's just very hazy. And then all of a sudden, blanket smoke. Can't see a thing. Full IMC conditions. All right, systems induced, mechanical, automation, flight control, trim, engine failures. All right, systems loss of control in flight doesn't mean it broke. All right, it can just be not correctly configured. After a failure, gear or flap. The other day we had a asymmetric flap retraction, and the student misidentified it as an engine failure and started going into the engine failure drills. All right, trim runaway, mistrim, leading to extreme control forces. Right? There have been accidents or incidents of runaway trim not handled correctly and nearly ended in disaster. Other times it has. Autopilot surprises, mode confusion, unexpected autopilot disconnects. Why is it doing that? All right, partial panel, unreliable airspeed, leading to wrong energy management. Instrument failure training, partial panel, limited panel. I was just saying to my students the other day that I used to do a limited panel, no attitude indicator, no directional gyro, NDB approach off the compass in our IFR training and in the test. That doesn't happen now, and I know most people applying for an instrument rating wouldn't even be able to do that if they've even done it. It's usually just some unusual attitude training and then can I have my instruments back? All right. Those that have never actually flown a decent distance without those instruments haven't had that experience. And this is something that we're robbing them of opportunity for that. Right? All these things can lead to single pilot distraction. Airlines tend to deal with these things better. They're better protected because of redundancies, SOPs and checklists. There's 2 crew cross-monitoring. Accidents, errors can be hopefully picked up and dealt with before they become worse. Right. Plus, regular simulator-driven abnormal training. Right. But even then, systems can become deadly when it all mixes in with high workload and potentially low altitude. All right, and then finally, the last one there in the bucket list is pilot-induced. So just handling errors, energy mismanagement, decision errors, distractions, and the fading of skills. This is the uncomfortable one because it does include stall spins in the circuit, base to final overshoots, low-level maneuvering, pressuritis into weather, average instrument scanning in IMC or at night, overconfidence, thinking that we can still do something we used to be able to do when we realize we can't do it as well. And I've again talked about that, just using tailwheel as an example of would be flying tailwheel aircraft daily. And then after a few years of being up here in Darwin, jumping back in one for a bit. I'm not talking about the DC-3, but a extra 300 and the Super Decathlon. I'm like, wow, man, I'm rusty. I'm sure in a few more circuits, everything would have been fine. But skills fade. Use it or lose it. All right. And then obviously distraction, electronic flight bag, passenger management. Pilot-induced doesn't mean bad pilot. It often just means a good pilot having a normal human moment in a high-threat environment without enough margin. So rolling that into then CFIT causes. How do perfectly good aircraft and good pilots hit terrain? It tends to cluster around reduced visibility either during IMC or at night, non-precision approaches becoming unstable approaches, incorrect altimeter settings leading to altitude busts, over-reliance on automation or equipment, or I can see okay, and poor terrain awareness, especially in unfamiliar areas. Okay, just because you're doing an instrument approach doesn't mean you're not going to hit anything. All right, VFR, you can be in a very familiar area, take away the visibility, and one house looks like the other. Your situational awareness of where you are in relation to terrain and obstacles can be drastically reduced. I've seen it firsthand. The ATSB's CFIT analysis highlights the central theme, loss of situational awareness in relation to terrain, obstacles, and water. All right, and one key point is CFIT isn't just mountains and IMC. All right, it can happen in VMC. It can happen in deceptively benign terrain because the awareness piece is the weakness, not the landscape. All right, it can be flying low level, high level, recognizing that an aircraft is getting into an unsafe condition, approaching a stall, running out of runway. All these moments can be intercepted and dealt with and possibly avoided if corrective action is taken at the appropriate time. Right, think of a simple distraction of trying to send an SMS while driving your car and drifting off the side of the road for a moment. I'm sure everyone's done it at least once. Right, so what are the differences here between the airlines and GA? Right, well, airlines generally have approach discipline, better stabilized approach procedures. Right, what is your stabilized approach procedure? Do you have one? Is it simply if you're not quite right by 300 feet go around, or you have more parameters? And then do you adhere to them and follow them to the letter? All right. TORs, EGPWS, strict SOPs, robust cockpit resource management and monitoring, simulation programs, loft training, upset prevention, abnormal events, right, approach and landing threats. All of this is generally visited and trained in an airline environment. Right? Globally, the airline accident rate has reduced over time, and IATA safety reporting shows ongoing industry improvement. right? But that doesn't mean solve forever. But it shows how these things can go towards helping reducing incidents and accidents. All right, Australia's system mirrors that strength. There haven't been any scheduled airline fatalities, all right, as per the ATP reporting. But if we look at helicopters and GA and RAOs, it's a different story. All right, helicopters operating typically in low altitude areas, especially mustering, but can be high altitude as well, right? But can get to greater visual environments, dust, spray, fog, flat light, all those things coming into land, depending on where that is, right? Low altitude, obstacle-rich environments, typically operating around buildings and landing pads a lot more, oil rigs, boats, ships. High workloads, single pilot operations, right? Hover, low speed regimes, get their pressure with EMS, SAR, external workload, all can contribute. All right. I don't know how many Instagram videos I've watched lately of EMS helicopters taking off with trees or power lines nearby and just gone straight into them. All right. A helicopter can be perfectly flyable and still flown into water terrain in these degraded visual environments. And LOC-I can happen fast if visual references collapse or situational awareness breaks down. All right, GA, be it training, private, charter, aerial work, the risk is concentrated because it's generally single pilot. There's less recurrent structured training, wide range of aircraft performance and avionics sophistications, more variability in SOP management, and more informal risk management. And training specifically is a double-edged sword. So we need exposure to stalls, unusual attitudes, low-level decision-making, simulated failures, but we now have the potential to introduce real risk while doing it. So commercial operations versus training accidents, the risk versus the reward. And this really gets to the heart of the debate. How do we produce pilots who can prevent LOC-I and CFIT without hurting people in training? Right? The training has benefits and it must be done, but only if it's designed correctly. The reward is better upset recognition and early prevention, better energy management, better understanding, better instrument disciplines, better go-around decision-making, better threat and error management, just to name a few. All right, but risks increase when maneuvers are conducted too low, when the instructor allows demonstrations to become almost competitions. They don't follow the SOPs, they try to prove a point. Maybe the student will recover if I just let it go a little bit further, diminishing their ability to take over, especially when things don't go to plan and students freeze on controls. All right, there can be ambiguity in who has control. We always say the more experienced the pilot's on board, the more chance there is of the other thinking the other person's got it under control. All right, if we start operating the aircraft near the edges of the envelope, especially in asymmetrics, slow flight, high drag configurations, all right, we reduce windows to recover or deal with issues, especially if the instructor is not appropriately trained or not current to do so. All right, then weather. We want to get exposure to weather, but again, there's still a limit because it doesn't matter that it's a training flight. It's an aircraft in weather that isn't suitable for flight. All right, fatigue. How do we take someone flying when they're tired to see if they will make bad decisions or not? All right, or other distractions going on in the background. So the right approach is not just avoiding training, it's training smarter. All right, we need to have clear gates, altitude limits, airspeed limits, recovery criteria, and we effectively have some of that in Schedule 8 mods, right? Private and professional criteria, right? But they need to be expanded on because they're assessment criteria, but not necessarily down into the envelope. All right, we don't want any egos, no surprises. All right, we need to brief what stop looks like. Where do we get to the point where the training exercise is now finished? It is no longer safe. It is no longer of benefit to the student. And we reset and start again. We need to use simulators to rehearse the high-risk parts, but again, they're often not necessarily available in light aircraft. All right, so use the aircraft training for handling feel, for startle management and real aerodynamics, but with safe margins. And this is where simulator implementation can come in, where it helps and where it doesn't. I'm sure a lot of you would have seen in December, Australian Senators Jeff Collins and Susan McDonald grilling the CASA regarding the risks associated with mandatory engine failure after takeoff, otherwise known as FTAPO training, into an engine aircraft. Some of the key details regarding the discussions and associated accidents included safety concerns being raised as to the number of deaths that have occurred during training accidents, including CASA officers being on board. The double jeopardy training risk, highlighting because many operators lack flight simulators, pilots are forced to repeatedly perform these dangerous simulated engine failure maneuvers or V1 cuts and actual aircraft multiplying risks. Now, I don't know of anyone that does V1 cuts in an aircraft now. There have certainly been issues in the past, and the Air North accident that I mentioned the other day, a few episodes ago, was definitely one of those. I'm not aware of anyone that does that in a real aircraft. I know in the Conquest, as I've said before, I never did a V1 cut. It was all talked about in upper air. The first V1 cuts that I did was in the King Air simulator. All right, so I'm pretty sure that risk is being mitigated. But again, someone has raised this, and the senators have raised this again in their hearing. All right, there have been accidents in 1995, 2003, 2010, 17, 2019, and then obviously most recently, mid-year, there's the fatal accident on the IPC flight test, which is currently being investigated. All right, talking about specific accidents during simulated failures, including the 2017 accident of the Ross Air Conquest near Renmark, which also had a CASA representative on board. All right, so these accidents are happening. Airlines get to use multi-million-dollar simulators. General aviation typically doesn't get that. We've got our little elite desktop simulators and the like. You absolutely can replicate certain things and cover off training scenarios in those simulators. I do it all the time, and I get fantastic results. I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that. But the point of this whole Senate inquiry was, why are people dying for training accidents, and is the training event worth the risk? Now, looking at everybody's results and comments there, I think the overwhelming response is that, yeah, absolutely, we need to be doing these things, because if we suddenly stop doing it, then it's only going to get worse. It is definitely higher risk, but managed correctly, proper training, this is where we can absolutely do these things safely. And we don't have to try and be a hero. We just need to get the points across that we're trying to highlight. We don't need to go to the absolute limit of VMCA and the like to make a point and to get a student to understand what's going to happen. And this is absolutely where sims are gold. All right, we can run procedures under pressure, engine failures, abnormal checklists, IMC decision making, automation management, scenario-based training, repetition. We can do 10 approaches or 10 recoveries without any risk at all. We can let it go to the limit. All right. And if we crash, if the wrong decisions are made, the inappropriate handling responses, etc., are made, it doesn't matter. Learning takes place at zero risk. We can reset, discuss, and have another go later. But sims do have limits. All right. Some aspects of kinesthetics, cueing, seat of the pants feel, the handling of the aeroplane is obviously a big complaint about, especially low fidelity simulators. Doesn't necessarily happen. That real startle factor of unexpected control forces, you can't really simulate in a basic sim. And the psychological weight of, is this really happening? It's not so much a realistic response, more than I find when I set up a scenario, there's something wrong with the sim. The sim's broken. Rather than, mate, you're spiraling out of control, what's the correct response? And then finally the recovery takes place. So the model of using the sim for repetition, risk-heavy scenarios is a no-brainer if we have the equipment and the availability of such simulators around, right? But the aircraft for handling, discipline, real threat and error management, adding in the dynamics of of actual ATC rather than simulated, actual weather, other traffic, all the other bits and pieces that come with taking a real airplane flying each day is definitely going to give a student a far better immersive experience. But if we can bridge that gap between the simulator and the aircraft with structured scenarios that treat every session like a risk-managed operation and dealing with it appropriately and taking it seriously, the benefits from that are absolutely immense. So the practical mitigations, what can actually reduce CFIT and LOC-I accidents and incidents? Well, mitigations for CFIT is stabilized approach criteria, even in GA, right? Make it more than just 300 feet and make sure you follow it. It's all well and good to brief what you're going to do or what the policy is, but it's not just lip service. It's there for a reason, right? If you've got TORS or terrain awareness technology, make sure you use it. I do have issues with that because, like I said, a lot of the airstrips up here, for example, are not in the database and they just keep going off all the time. It doesn't recognize the aerodrome. So you have to disable it, which unfortunately renders the whole system useless, right? But how do you train to use it correctly? A lot of people have terrain, pull up. And I go, well, the aerodrome's on the database. We really should have, part of our inbound briefing was we knew that and we should have disabled the terrain and warnings so that they weren't going to go off and then become a distraction and try and deal with that, usually below 1,000 feet when it starts going off, right? Minima disciplines, both in instrument approach minimas, but also personal minimas, not just the legal minimas, all right? Just because someone else is going doesn't mean you have to go. Stick to your minimas. We've always got to just expand our experience and knowledge and awareness, but bit by bit. All right. Altimeter approach, pre-brief setups. It's not just about briefing your arrival into an airport VFR or setting up an instrument approach, reading the plate. If nothing in front of you is set correctly, if the altimeter is not set to the local QNH, if the flight routes aren't set up the right way and bringing you in the way you thought you were going to come in. All right, and obviously plan B, activate that early, divert earlier than it feels necessary. Don't leave it to the last minute. The ATSB has explicitly urged the fitment of terrain avoidance systems for smaller aircraft in the context of CFIT risk narratives. But again, there are issues with that. It works well in big cities, but not necessarily out in the bush. Mitigators for loss of control in flight. Obviously, UPRT courses, upset prevention mindset. All right, recognize early, avoid the corner. We don't want to get caught in that corner there. The whole point of UPRT training is, as we talked about in the last episode, is to hopefully never have to use it, to recognize when you're getting into a spot where your options are drastically reducing and do something about it. It's all well and good to fly on the edge as long as you understand the room you've got, a room for error. Right? Angle of attack, energy awareness, just understanding what that means. Right? Conceptually, even if it's not instrumentated. Instrument proficiency, especially for VFR pilots who accidentally touch IMC, but for IFR pilots to be realistic about their instrument proficiency, not the fact that they've just lodged an IFR flight plan for the last 100 flights, but they've actually been doing instrument procedures. Go around culture. All right. Treat it as a success, not a failure. Recognize it early. Don't try and be a hero and get it on the ground. Go around, fix it on the next one, and learn from it. Sometimes we all get it wrong, even in the big jets. So it's not a big airplane, little airplane thing. Threat and error management, decision discipline, continuation bias. It kills. All right. There comes a point where it's time to bug out. And nighttime reduced visibility training, set realistic limitations and strict guardrails. Night VFR is a very broad term of what is night VFR in one place is not in another. All right. And Australia specifically, VFR into IMC, it should not be a recurring theme. So what do we do differently? Keep investing in sims. Keep enforcing compliance with SOPs and procedures and understanding automation. All right. Normalizing those SOPs for private flying. Doesn't have to be an airline thing. Set up your own if you don't have any. Right. Treat every flight with threat and error management principles in place. Identify the threats. Acknowledge the potential errors that can be made. All those risk mitigators. Make recurrent training meaningful. When you've got a flight review, do something different. Ask to practice skills that you have not done for a long time, not just to tick the review box exercise. Right? Use sims, scenario-based training to reduce exposure. Understand escape plans, emergency drills and procedures, rather than just reading a checklist out of a manual with no context whatsoever. All right, so if we zoom out a little bit, CFIT, it's about awareness. LOC-I is about control. The reason they're still major accident categories is that they live right here at the intersection of human limitations, environmental threats, and system design. And that can look different in an A320 with 2 crew, full automation, than it does in a single pilot GA aircraft at last light with a whole lot of bad weather ahead and low fuel. But the good news is these are not unsolvable problems. So the mitigations are known. The challenge is implementation, the culture, the discipline, the training, the design, and the willingness to choose margin over, let's just push it just this once. So if you're listening to this as a pilot or an instructor or an operator, here's your takeaway challenge. Pick one thing that you're going to tighten up this week, be it your stable approach discipline, your personal minimas, developing a simulator session, VFR into IMC decision plan, or some sort of upset prevention refresher. Right? Just one improvement, because CFIT and LOC-I don't usually just happen because someone didn't care. They happen because margins quietly evaporated. All right. Thanks for listening. Bit of a longer episode than I intended, but really, really important. And I hope you've got some great takeaways from that. Have an absolutely wonderful, happy new year. Welcome in 2026. And we've got some massive plans for next year, some very exciting flying to be done. And I hope that you make your aviation goals and achieve some big wins next year as well, whatever that may be. All right. If you'd like to know any more info or anything, feel free to email me. All the links and descriptions in the episode description. And if you are enjoying what you're hearing, please consider supporting me on Patreon. There's 3 monthly tiers there, and all the money goes towards just helping put this show together and the content that is up and coming as well. All right, until the next time, blue skies, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, guys.